Step 6. Developed and sustained self-love through regular communication with our inner child. The inner child is a concept used in psychology to denote the childlike aspect of our psyche, a subpersonality embodying the residual effects of childhood. Alcoholism and the symptoms that accompany it, depression, strained relationships, severe mood swings, emptiness, and low self-esteem, often arise as a result of neglecting our inner child. The adverse effects of deep-rooted childhood experiences lay dormant in our psyche until triggered by current stimuli. When ignited, they evoke strong, irrational responses that often knock us off balance. Afterwards, we often exclaim, "I don't know what came over me then. I'm not myself today," or "I was like a man possessed." These spontaneous, irrational outbursts are often indicative of a wounded inner child rebelling. The powerful practice of inner child therapy can eradicate the underlying issues that give rise to these eruptions and promote harmony in our lives. Gaston Bachelard once said, "Like a forgotten fire, a childhood can always flare up again within us." The inner child is the intrinsic embodiment of all our fears, worries, anxieties, and guilt. It is our epicenter of sensitivity. Vulnerability and oversensitivity are signs that our inner child feels threatened and requires our attention. Ignoring these pleas leads to fragmentation and an underlying sense of dissociation. That is, we feel confused, distant, and detached. But when we listen and act upon these pleas, our lives are transformed in miraculous ways. The feelings of our inner child are not contrived or distorted. They are authentic and need to be attended to. Suppressing these feelings puts a constant drain on our vital resources and leads to depletion and depression. More importantly, detaching from this authentic source of emotion is a sure way to become lost, confused, and totally out of touch with ourselves. Inner child therapy can help us diffuse the explosive source of our destructive tendencies. Our unconscious mind presents unresolved issues for resolution via the inner child complex. This can be a highly emotional and disruptive experience, but we should not shy away from it. We should embrace it. Although it may not seem like it at the time, it is a much needed positive development that will lead to liberation. Remember, our childhood relationships are not dead and buried. They are buried alive, active in our unconscious. We cannot process and release them until they surface, and turbulent emotions are often indicative of them surfacing. So should you encounter this emotional unrest, recognize it as your authentic self trying to break through your rigid defense systems and lead to a life beyond your wildest dreams. The effects of internalized relationships are so important that there is a whole strand of psychology called object relations theory dedicated to them. During childhood, we internalize versions of significant people in our lives. Parents, peers, teachers, siblings, clergymen, and so on all take residence in our unconscious mind. Object relations refers to these internalizations as objects. The term object relations therefore refers to the relationships between these internal representations of real-life characters from our past and our inner child. Yes, we have a drama going on within us that is reenacted externally. When I say these internal relationships are not dead and buried, but buried alive, I'm referring to the fact that they are mirrored in our external reality, manifesting repeatedly throughout our lives until the issues they embody are resolved. The term transference is used to describe the process of reenacting these internalized relationships with real people in our lives currently. Via this mechanism, issues we had with people in our past are transferred onto people in our lives today, and the same problems reoccur over and over again. We reinvent the relationships we had in the past in order to resolve the issues they embody. As this is an unconscious phenomenon, it goes unrecognized and often causes mayhem. So let's clarify the process with an example. Josie was beaten by a violent father as a child. Subsequently, she'd chosen partners who also administered violent beatings. A pattern had emerged whereby Josie would end one violent relationship only to enter into another. When she came for therapy, I explained to her that we internalize versions of significant people in our lives, and the relationships we had with them are ongoing in our unconscious mind. In Josie's case, the internal relationship between her and her father was being reenacted externally. She chose partners of a violent disposition in order to solve the issues she had with her father, but she didn't know it because all this happens unconsciously. In effect, her real-life partners were playing the role of her father as the contents of her psyche manifested itself externally. However, trying to resolve her issues via this process simply wouldn't work. To eradicate her destructive pattern, she would have to work through the catalyst relationship, that is, the one with her father. After processing and releasing the issues she had with her father in therapy, Joseph's destructive pattern of choosing violent partners magically disappeared. She no longer had an unconscious need to resolve issues involving violent men. This is a prime example of how the contents of our psyche are reflected in our external reality. When we harbour dysfunctional relationships within, we tend to attract dysfunctional relationships without. Listening to the anguish of our inner child is imperative if we want to eradicate such destructive phenomenon. The importance of childhood experience on our psychological development is further emphasized in attachment theory. See the book Alcoholic to Alchemist for more information. Through longitudinal studies, John Bowlby and others found that the quality of our early relationships shaped our capacity to enter into successful relationships throughout the rest of our lives. They found that children who had caregivers who responded to their needs and acted as a secure base from which they could explore their surroundings were able to successfully integrate and form intimate relationships throughout the rest of their life. Having received love and affection in their formative months, these children developed an internal representation of themselves as being worthy of love and affection. Consequently, they developed a healthy degree of self-worth and esteem. Conversely, children who didn't have a secure base found it difficult to integrate. Having not received love and affection as infants, they formed an internal representation of themselves as being unworthy of love and so developed low self-esteem. So, undoubtedly, the effects of childhood influence on our psychological development are immense. The nature of our experience in our formative years sets a template for the rest of our life. But what if we didn't have a good childhood? Are we doomed, I hear you cry? The answer is a resounding no. Your primary caregivers, parents, foster parents, or whoever cared for you in childhood may not have acquired the necessary skills to administer love and affection in the way in which you needed it. But you do have such a person in your life now. You. The child within never ages. Therefore, with the help of the nurturing aspect of yourself, it is never too late to have a happy childhood. Remember, as within, so without. As you develop a loving relationship between your inner child and your inner parent, the effects will be far-reaching and reflected externally. Your ability to form intimate, meaningful relationships will be greatly enhanced as your self-esteem, self-respect and self-love begins to rocket. Just before leaving this subject, 3 important notes I'd like to point out. 1. If your primary caregiver did not possess the necessary attributes to administer the love and affection, do not interpret it as lack of love. This is very rarely the case. Their disposition is often a legacy from their own upbringing. They feel the love but find it difficult to express. 2. If you had a particularly difficult childhood, I would thoroughly recommend that you carry out any exercises appertaining to inner child with the aid of a trained professional, ideally a psychodynamic counsellor or one of our own Alcoholic to Alchemist licensed therapists, of which you can find details on our website www.altoal.com. 3. As these exercises can be highly emotional, a period of approximately 6 months sobriety is recommended before you attempt them. However, if you go to the page Inspiration and Liberation on our website, you will find a simple inner child exercise there that you can start from the word go, one that will help you in your initial stages of sobriety, one that will help you to develop self-esteem and a much needed sense of self-love.